Very good. Let me just check something. Okay, you want to start, Rav Kohn, maybe?
No. I'm here to listen to you.
Okay, okay. Just give
Mainly.
me. Okay. Okay. Give me just a moment, and we'll
That's
start.
fine. Was anyone in the Shiur last week? Tikva.
Yes, of course.
Oh,
Always.
what did you learn last week?
I tried. Well, about the importance to show the Jewish way, to be to have to show empathy, to show the good things that the Jewish way, the behavior, who is very important. And well, I don't remember more, but it was a very good message. So somebody maybe can help me.
Can anyone else say something about what you did last
They
week?
were talking about the anger, I think. I remember. Two ways how if they were discussing if you can be angry at your student if he didn't do what is expected, and the other rabbi say, "Nay, you cannot." And this was the two ways of the 2 points of view.
They say that we cannot have the Jewish people. They cannot have anger and all these things in the heart. This is not so. The important to work with these things and to show that we are the light. So, what's the message?
Good.
Okay, so we're ready. Sorry for the delay. Let's get started and dive in to the Midrashim on this parasha. Parashat Naso. Somebody was pointing to me. Somebody in the community always reminds me every year, Naso, the longest parasha, which is true probably if you count the verses, although it's a little bit misleading because a very big part of the verses are actually repetitions. Verse of the same thing. The tribes, they all, the 12 tribes, the leader of each tribe at the end of the parasha gives a present to the Beit HaMikdash. And then it turns out that actually each one gave exactly the same present. So you end up with a very, very long parasha with a lot of the same words said again and again and again. But I wanted to talk about the Midrash, which is actually going a little bit earlier. And one of the very interesting subjects in the parasha is the concept of the Nazir, the person who promises not to cut his hair, not to drink wine, and not to touch bodies, dead bodies, that is, not to be in contact with dead bodies. It's a very interesting concept. It's not the concept that we really that's really been continued. I mean, the Talmud says you shouldn't promise to be a Nazir today because you'll never be able to end your Nazirut. At the end of the Nazirut, you are meant to bring a sacrifice, a korban. and you shave your hair. It's a whole process. You cannot do it by the temple. So somebody today would say, promise to be a Nazir, he has to be a Nazir either for the rest of his life, or if Mashiach comes in, obviously, and the temple is rebuilt, then that would then he would bring the sacrifice there. Usually people were Nazirim for a limited amount of time. So we, of course, have these famous stories. Let me just do finding page, it'll be quicker. We have these stories of certain people who were Nazirim. No, why is it not turning to Hebrew? We can probably do it in English. Tzaddik, Shimon HaTzaddik, Shimon HaTzaddik, excellent. Okay, so that's what it was. Most Nazirim were not Nazirim the whole life. Of course, we have the famous exceptions of the prophet Shmuel, the judge Shimshon, who never cut their hair in their whole life, and so forth. So now, Lehazir Lashem, here we have an interesting story from Shimon HaTzaddik. Now, it should be very worth knowing who was Shimon HaTzaddik before we quote him. Shimon HaTzaddik was the Kohn Gadol, the high priest, just before the time of the story of Chanukah. Yeah, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Shimon HaTzaddik was actually the father of Yochanan and the grandfather of Matityahu. Matityahu, of course, is famous. He was the whole Maccabean revolt against the Greeks. And Shimon HaTzaddik, first of all, is mentioned in the Pirkei Avot as being from the last ones of the Knesset HaGdolah, of the great assembly. So when the second temple was built, there were many years, there was sort of a great assembly that was taking decisions how to rebuild Judaism after so many years of exile in Babylon. And Shimon HaTzaddik was sort of the last one of that era, or of that program, organization. And then things changed in his time. Alexander the Great, which we met a few weeks ago, also in the Midrashim, he conquered Eretz Israel. He saw Shimon HaTzaddik. He was very impressed by the Jews and their customs. So that was just the context to understand who is Shimon HaTzaddik. But of course, he was a Kohen Gadol. So he actually worked in the Beit HaMikdash. So what he's telling us is real stuff. It's not somebody hundreds of years later speculating what might have happened in Beit HaMikdash. These are real stories that he remembers. Shimon HaTzaddik said, maybe a volunteer, somebody would like to read? No volunteers? Okay, I don't mind reading. So there's a quote, of course, from the Torah, to abstain for the law, lehazir l'Hashem, and to be a Nazir to Hashem, to be more correct. And Shimon HaTzaddik now tells what was his experience. Shimon HaTzaddik said, in all my days, I had never eaten the guilt offering of a Nazirite. Now, is the guilt offering very interesting. Amongst when the Nazir finishes his Nazirut, stops being a Nazir, could be a month, it could be 2 months, it could be a year, whatever he promised to be a Nazir for. At the end, there's a whole sacrificial temple service with shaving off your hair, with bringing certain offerings. And one of these offerings is a guilt offering, Asham Nazir. Yeah? There's, by the way, a lot of discussion what's sinful. The Nazir is really the holy person, takes upon himself holy things. That's another interesting Mama Chazal, for which we could spend time on studying. But there's a lot of talk about what exactly is wrong in being a Nazir. And if it's wrong, then why does the Torah give such an option? There's a lot to talk about in terms of asceticism, I believe is the correct word, or abstaining from different pleasures or enjoyments, and how good or how bad that is. I think there's a lot to talk about that. But that's not the subject, the direction I want to go today. Shimon Tzadik said, I never ate that type of korban. That means sacrifice were eaten by Kohanim, usually, depending on the sacrifice. And this, when a Nazir would come, he would bring the sacrifice and the food would be offered to the Kohanim, to the priests. And the Kohanim would divide it, or you could choose, or whatever. Shimon said, I was never interested in this type of sacrifice. One time, one from the south came, and I saw him. He was ruddy, with beautiful eyes and a fine appearance, and his locks were curls arranged in piles. I said to him, what did you see that led you to destroy this fine hair? So he saw this man who was very good looking, with nice long curly hair. And he said, wow, like, interesting that you want to shave it off, because that's the sort of the climax or the end of the Nezirut is actually that long hair that you're not allowed to cut. At the end, you have to shave it all off. He whispered to me, Rabbi, I was a shepherd in my city, and I went to fill the vessel with water from the spring. I saw my reflection in the water, and my evil inclination quickly overcame me and sought to eliminate me from the world. Yeah, very, very strong words here. Maybe those of you are less, turn off the sound so you don't get disturbed. Those who are maybe of you are less accustomed to the language of the Talmud, evil inclination is an expression we encounter very often in Talmudic discussion. In Hebrew, there's the word the Yetzer Hara, yeah, the desire to do something bad. And we all have a Yetzer HaTov and a Yetzer Hara. So the Yetzer HaTov is usually understood as desire to do good or moral consciousness. And Yetzer Hara, so to say, just the desire to do whatever you want and not worry about whether it's right or wrong. And it seems to be this shepherd who was looking at reflection. He doesn't really say what does he mean that the evil inclination sought to eliminate me from the world, sort of leaving that a bit to our imagination. But I assume the evil inclination was encouraging him to do things that are bad, to maybe take advantage of his very good looks, to maybe lead a more immoral life. That's what I would guess. Again, I don't know, the text is very satum, very closed, very cryptic. But it seems to be there was a moment when he felt an urge to do something bad. I spoke to the Yetzer Hara, wicked one, why are you proud of something that is not yours? Is of dust, worms, and maggots. I will consecrate you to heaven and shave you for the sake of heaven. Maybe he's talking to himself here. Wicked one. So he's calling himself wicked one. You have all these thoughts and you think you're so good looking. You know, this body is going to be eaten by worms and maggots. It's not valuable. So, you know what I'll do? I'll consecrate to heaven and I have to shave it off for the sake of heaven. So the shepherd, very interesting, because we would think the main part of the Nazir is growing the long hair, right? That's what the Nazirim are famous for, the prohibition to cut their hair. Shimshon Hagibor, the strong man who all his power was in his hair, and when his hair was cut, he lost all his power. Here, this man wasn't even thinking so much about growing his hair. His hair was already beautiful. He promised to cut off his hair, to shave it off. And the way to do it would be to become a Nazir for a period of time, be forbidden to cut your hair, have a very long and beautiful hair, and then have to shave it off. And that would be, so to say, a way to control his urge, his Yetzer Hara, his desire to do evil. I lowered my head, so Shimon HaTzadik continues, he heard his story. I lowered my head and kissed him, and I said to him, may there be many like you in Israel, who perform the will of the omnipresent. The omnipresent Hamakom, the one who is everywhere. In your regard, the verse said to abstain for the law. Yeah? Lehazir Lashem. So he says, The verse said, Lehazir Hashem, to make a Nazir for Hashem. So you are a true Nazir for Hashem. That's what he's saying. So I think there's a lot. Yeah, I think we could continue afterwards. The end of the story is also interesting a little bit, but I think let's just concentrate on this one story for now. What is happening here? Shimon HaTzadik, he is a Kohen Gadol. He's got some problem with being with Nazirim, obviously. Didn't tell us why. I think that you're going to see a little bit later in the text. But there's one Nazir that he really respected, that he really wanted to eat his sacrifice, really felt this was a really holy man. That was the Nazir who used the Nazirut, so to say, as a weapon, or should we call it a psychological exercise or something like that, to fight his Yetzer Hara. I think that's a very interesting concept, because really, to me, the whole Nazirut is really interesting. What is it? The Torah gives such an option of Nazirut. It exists. There is such a thing as promising or taking vows or oaths. But then the question is, why does it exist and for what purpose? And here it seems to be that the answer is that the Nazirut should be used for, so to say, control the Yetzer Hara, control yourself, whether it's pride or a desire for immorality, whatever it is, so to say, put a limit on yourself. In this case, the hair was apparently something that led him to evil, to bad, and so this was the way to work with it. But before we move forward, I'd like to hear your ideas. Of course, of Kohn, I'll be happy to hear your ideas, also everybody else. What thoughts does this awaken? The story of the shepherd, and not just the story of the shepherd, Shimon HaTzadik's reaction here. Why do you think he was so impressed by this particular Nazir? And you understand, this is a Kohen Gadol, who was for a very long time as a Kohen Gadol. He was not happy with any of the other Nazirim, it sounds like, except this one. What do you think? Why was he, if he's happy with Nazirim, then let him be happy with Nazirim, and if he's not happy, then what's special about this man? I'm happy to hear a bit your ideas and thoughts. Very silent today. Maybe we'll read the end of the Midrash. I think that will open a little bit of a door to discuss this. Rabbi Mona asked, why would Shimon HaTzadik not eat the guilt offering of a Nazirite? That means to say, what was Shimon HaTzadik's problem with Nazirim? Yeah, all the other Nazirim were not good. He doesn't want to eat their sacrifice. This one, yes. If you say this because the Nazirite is a sinner, because he afflicted himself by abstaining from wine, did Shimon HaTzadik not partake of a sin offering of fats or a sin offering of blood? So he says, what's wrong? So he brings, there is an opinion in the Talmud that being a Nazir is actually, a Nazir is called the choter, sinner, because he afflicted himself by abstaining from wine. And by the way, this is a very interesting, very Jewish concept, that asceticism or abstaining from pleasures just for the sake of abstaining from pleasures is not in itself a positive thing. It doesn't make you holier. And actually the opposite. If there's a pleasure in this world which is permitted, which Torah has permitted, then to some extent God has given it for you to enjoy. of course, within certain limits. Yeah, you can't eat something that's not kosher. Even if something is kosher, you shouldn't eat too much and make yourself sick. That's also against the Torah. But within moderation, the pleasures of this world were created for man. And if that's the case, wine is a gift from God. That's what basically the Midrash is saying. It's an idea that's mentioned in the Gemara, that the Nazir, for promising not to drink wine for a certain amount of time, is wrong. God has given wine for you to use. We use it in Kiddush. It's a way to mesameach, to bring happiness to a Yom Tov or to whatever it is. To just promise not to have it is not right. Why are you not happy with God's presence? Again, if that's the case, that raises in my head another question. So why is there a whole parasha in the Torah called Nazir? If it's not the right thing to do. But there is such an opinion in the Talmud. And he says, could that be the reason? Maybe, and this is by the way the style of the Talmud. The Talmud will tell a story, and the Midrashim as well, and then sort of dissect it and consider it and ponder it. So here, Rabbi Mona, who lived, I assume, much later than Rabbi Shimon HaTzadik, he heard this story and he's trying to think, so why? Why Shimon HaTzadik was unhappy with the other Nazirim and happy with this Nazir? Why was he unhappy with the other Nazirim? So hypothesis number one, maybe he held like that opinion that being a Nazir is a bad thing. So he didn't want to eat that sacrifice because he thought being a Nazir is bad. But then he says, did he not partake of a sin offering of fats or a sin offering of blood? Yeah, so what's this fat and blood? It means to say if somebody by accident ate certain fats, chelev, which are forbidden, there are certain parts of the cow that need to be removed, that you're not allowed to eat, that's chelev. Or blood, drinking blood, eating blood is forbidden from the Torah. And if somebody did them by accident, not knowing it was forbidden or not knowing that the food contained it, he would have to bring a korban in terms of the was sacrifice. Now, Shimon HaTzadik never said, I won't touch this sacrifice. This man is a sinner. He's a bad man, a bad woman. I don't want to touch this sacrifice. I don't say that. Presumably, all those years he was a Kohn Gadol, many times he did eat many different types of sacrifice and also sacrifice of sinners. If somebody was broke Shabbat, Mechalel Shabbat, he would bring a sacrifice. So Shimon HaTzadik didn't have a problem with sins in general, as in eating the sacrifice of a sinner. The contrary, it's a very big mitzvah for the Kohen to eat the sin offering sacrifice, because when the Kohen eats it, that is what brings atonement to the person who has done the sin. So, what was Shimon HaTzadik's problem with the Nazir? What's wrong with the Nazir? Is he worse than somebody who breaks Shabbat? Is he worse than somebody who drinks blood? What's so wrong about this Nazir? He seems to be a great guy. He keeps the whole Torah, and on top of that, he promised, I want to do a few more things. I also don't want to drink wine. I also don't want to cut my hair. What was Shimon HaTzadik's problem? So the Midrash of Shimon HaTzadik believe that people take a vow of Naziriteship in anger. Since they vow in anger, they will ultimately come to regret. Since he regrets, his offerings become tantamount to slaughtering non-consecrated animals in the temple courtyard. However, since this one took a vow after consideration, his mouth and his heart were in concern. Yeah, just gonna look at the Hebrew a bit, because it's so funny when you read the Hebrew and the English. When you read the Hebrew and the English, you need so many words of English to say just a few words in Hebrew. The style of the Midrash, the Talmud, they can put so much information in a few words. So I just find it funny to read this in English, and you find these long sentences, and you have to explain everything for somebody studying Midrash Talmud. You know the words, you know what they mean already. But yeah. So he's saying like this. Shimon HaTzadik thought, he believed, that most of the Nazirim, why did they promise to be Nazir? They have a moment of anger. There are moments where they're not thinking straight. you know, I don't know what he means, but perhaps I could imagine somebody drank a lot of alcohol and he did very stupid things, and now he feels very bad. And in a moment of anger, in a moment of just excitement, he just goes, "Okay, I'm not gonna drink wine for 2 months. I'm gonna be a Nazir." But he didn't come after careful consideration, this vow, and therefore, does he really mean it? Doesn't he mean it? And if he doesn't, if he's regretting it, if he's not really meaning it, she would say, should he even be bringing a sacrifice? Maybe it's not a pure promise of Nazir. That's what he seems to be saying. And if something's not a proper sacrifice, then you're not allowed to eat. You're not allowed to bring a sacrifice in the temple. You're not meant to bring according to halacha. So he had a halachic problem with the sincerity or the halachic validity even of the promise of Nazir. Many people, they just promise and they don't perhaps mean it completely. Whereas this shepherd, he really thought about it. It wasn't a moment of anger. It wasn't a moment. It was a very calculated decision. He felt, I have a problem, and the problem seems to be my good looks, and they are leading me to a bad path in life. Almost a bit like nowadays you talk a bit about therapy or something like that. He located the problem. He promised the Vav Bezirut to act upon the problem, and he solved the problem. Not sure how it works because your hair grows back. Did he, from then on, did he start having short hair? I don't know. I don't know if he solved the problem forever. But he seems to be, he saw some sort of rational thinking in that. And I think I find this text very interesting. Also, we don't really have Nazirim. I think there is one or two stories of some people who promised to be Nazir, even in modern times, but it's a very, very, very uncommon thing. But the concept of thinking, first of all, thinking straight, not deciding anything, definitely not promising things. We actually, by observant Jews, we always use the expression bli neder, without a promise, because we don't want to take the risk of promising something that we shouldn't be promising. But also, just thinking ahead. Thinking, what are my challenges? What is my Yetzer Hara? And why do I fall into this pit? Whatever it is, some people might have a food problem, some people might have a problem with waking up to tefillah, some people might have a problem with Shabbat. The person should sort of think, these are my problems, and going to find a way to deal with them. I need to make a plan how to correct the problem. I think it's quite inspiring and quite interesting, this thing. It reminds me, and I was reading, I think the Midrash brings down this Pirkei Avot somewhere here as well. I couldn't find a place right now. But we're going to read Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot is chapter 1 again, this coming Shabbat. And there you have these words of the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, so before Shimon HaTzadik, and they say, Asu siag laTorah, make a fence around the Torah. So they say, don't just, obviously you have to keep the Torah, 13 mitzvot, and you shouldn't add anything to the Torah. It's forbidden to add new things to the Torah. And part of the Nazir's mistake is that he adds extra prohibitions. But sometimes you add extra prohibitions because if you don't have something extra to protect the Torah, then you're going to break the Torah itself. So this Nazir, this shepherd, there's nothing wrong in having long hair. They're not going to find any halacha in the Talmud. Don't have long hair, or don't be good looking. But he looked at it, in his case, in his personal life, this was becoming an issue, and he had to deal with it. And if people know what is their issue, then that is maybe a place to put a siag, to put a limit. If you know that going to a certain place will cause problems, will put you into a situation of temptation, maybe that's a place where you shouldn't go, or you should take some precautions next time you go there. Okay, these are just my thoughts. It'll be very interesting hearing
Can you just summarize very shortly for me, Shmuel? Why did Shimon HaTzadik, what was his infatuation with this one Nazir? What did he do right?
Seems to be, from the end of the Midrash, it says very clearly, let's take the words in Hebrew. The Midrash ends with the words, a lot of text here. Wait a second. Up. Oh, this is long. Yeah. וזה מתוך יישוב הדעת נדר, ופיו וליבו שווים. He took a decision calmly, and his mouth and his heart were in it. What he said and what he said what he really meant and thought. It wasn't, a moment of anger, or it was a well thought and planned decision. He used Nezirut in a very rational and calm and calculating way. That's how I understand this text. But I'm happy to hear if you understood it different.
Does anyone else have? I'm gonna see if I can find. Where is the story where he arose? As the Midrash no.
I have a question about the Nazir. Was in the Tanakh Simson the only? I don't remember if he's another Nazir in the Tanakh. Was another Nazir?
So it's an interesting question. Shimshon was a Nazir Olam, a Nazir his whole life, and Shmuel as well, and Shmuel HaNavi, the prophet. But there must have been much more Nazirim. That means lots of people who promised to be Nazir for a limited amount of time. I can't think of any person specifically, but I know, for example, the prophets, Isaiah speak, I shall take these people as Nazirim. So the word Nazir and the concept of being a Nazir does come up in the Tanakh to some extent. Yeah, but here in the parasha of this week, Torah sort of delineates, sort of specifies the halachot, the laws of a Nazir. How does it work? That's basically how it is. Yeah, but Shmuel and Shimshon were exceptions because it was Nezirut Olam, Nezirut for the whole life, and it wasn't actually even their own promise. That's why they're not the best example of Nazirim, because usually the whole Nezirut is about promising to be a Nazir. Shimshon and Shimshon got a revelation. The mother got a revelation from an angel who said, "Ta'ar lo yavor al rosho," his hair should not be cut. And Shmuel, that was Hannah's promise. Hannah promised that he was going to be holy to Hashem, the son that he was going to get. It was the mother's promise. The son never said anything. I don't know how does that work in halachot of Nezirut. Can a mother promise for the son, and how does that bind it? I don't know. It's an interesting thing. What about when he grows and is an adult? Is he obligated? I assume Shmuel was a Nazir his whole life. I think so, but it's an interesting concept because those two Nazirim are quite unique.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if maybe so the same Midrash appears in the Talmud and the Gemara, Shmuel, and I think that there's a different answer in the Gemara. I'll try and show you and see if we might find a different different aspect of the Midrash. Here. So,
Is it in Maseret Nazir or where is this?
this is in. Hang on, I forgot.
That's an interesting side note for everyone. There's a whole tractate in the Talmud called Nazir, even though the Talmud was written at a time when the temple was already destroyed and there were no more Nazirim. But it just shows how valued the Torah was by the Chachamim, that they would study and spend hundreds of hours writing, collecting halachot, and discussing halachot, which they couldn't apply in practice. There's tractates also about the temple service and the special laws of purity and impurity. So just a very interesting concept itself.
It's in Nedarim,
Nedarim.
9bet. So here the Midrash appears again, and it says, Rabbi Shimon HaTzadik said, "In all my days as a priest, I never ate the guilt offering of a ritually impure Nazarite except for one occasion. One time, a particular man who was a Nazarite came from the south, and I saw that he had beautiful eyes and was good looking, and the fringes of his hair were arranged in curls. I said to him, 'My son, what did you see that made you decide to destroy this beautiful hair of yours by becoming a Nazarite? A Nazarite must shave off his hair at the completion of his term. If he becomes impure before the completion of his term, he shaves off his hair and starts his term of Nazariteship again.'" So here the story appears where Rabbi Shimon HaTzadik, he is surprised that someone with such great hair is willing to destroy it. Why is he going to destroy it? He's going to destroy it because at some point, inevitably, a Nazir will have to cut off his hair. Here, to begin with, it will be forbidden for him to cut off his hair, right? And he's supposed to grow this long hair. But at some point, this time of being a Nazir will end, and therefore, so also the hair will then go off. So that's why I asked him this. He said to him, says the man with the beautiful hair, "I was a shepherd for my father in my city, and I went to draw water from the spring. And I looked at my reflection in the water, and my evil inclination quickly overcame me and sought to expel me from the world. And I said to myself, 'Wicked one, why do you pride yourself in a world that is not yours? Why are you proud of someone who will eventually be food in the grave of worms and maggots, meaning your body?'" So this we all saw in the Midrash. Shimon HaTzadik continues the narrative. "I immediately arose and kissed him on his head. I said to him, 'My son, may there be more who take vows of Nazariteship like you among the Jewish people. About you, the verse states, when either a man or a woman shall clearly utter a vow, the vow of a Nazarite, to consecrate himself to the Lord.'" So this is a pasuk which we find in the Torah, "Ish ki yafli lindor neder nazir le'azir l'Hashem," that this, which is when either a man or a woman shall clearly utter a vow, the vow of a Nazarite, to consecrate himself to the Lord. So this is what Shimon HaTzadik, this is his expression, which is, I think, in the Talmud, comes to show why Shimon HaTzadik was such a fan of this Nazir in comparison to all the others. And he says, "This person, I would eat from this person's food, but no one else's," right? So, and this is what this Rav Mani, that we also saw in the Midrash, and he objects to this, and he says, "How could this be? How can this Nazir be so much better than everyone else?" And I think the answer in the Talmud, I think, is because not every Nazir took this vow for God. So you mentioned, you found in the Midrash, Shmuel, you found this beautiful psychological explanation to what the differences were. And I think that Talmud brings here in a kind of a different kind of psychological reasoning, meaning not every vow is taken for the right reasons. And sometimes they're taken for in the wrong ways. How I heard you, Shmuel, interpret the Midrash. Sometimes the way you do it might be wrong. And here, I think there's more about the reasons for why you do it. And Shimon HaTzadik points out that I could see that the reasons why you did it was for God. So if you consecrate yourself to God, you're a good one. But apparently, it doesn't seem like everyone is doing that. So that's also one of the dangers of the Nazirut. One of the dangers is that sometimes the motives behind this psychological state might be more about the person than it is about God. And I think that's what the Talmud is pointing out.
An interesting idea, very nice. Why would somebody promise to be a Nazir if not for God? I'm just wondering, what do you think? It's very hard for us to know because we didn't live in a time. The Nazirut seems to have been relatively common back then. But what could have been the motives for somebody to promise to be a Nazir?
Yeah, I mean, it's, maybe there's an element of show off. There could be an element of status. It could be, and all of these are inward pointing. I think that's another nice way of explaining the Talmud. Is your vow of becoming a Nazir, is it inward looking or is it outward looking?
Very interesting. I mean, we have this, we don't have Nazir so much here, but we do definitely have this question of, am I doing religious things, whatever they are, mitzvot, or customs, is it really about me? It's something they talk about a lot in religious circles, like how much are people doing things for the right reasons, because things become accepted community standards, whether it's the way you dress, whether it's keeping certain very strict standards of kashrut. You see it a lot especially in Israel or in America, where people have a lot of options, of course, and eating this kosher stam, not eating that kosher stam. Is it really, I'm so holy, I want to protect my mouth from anything that might be considered possibly not kosher? Or is it coming from a place of, I'm very religious and I'm never going to touch this. It's
right.
Beneath my dignity, so to say. Then you're doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah. I think it could be that part of the answer, or the way to go even deeper into this midrash, is connected to the discussion that we find in the Talmud in Masechet Nedarim that we just read, where this midrash appears. So this midrash appears in a discussion about the differences and what's better between a neder and a nedava. And which basically is there are two ways of doing a vow in the Jewish tradition, especially in this time in the time we're talking about, in the time of the Talmud. You could either do a neder or you could do a nedava, and they're just two different types of vows, which I've been trying to figure out today what the difference is, and I'm not sure I'm getting it, but one is clearly seen as better than the other, and I'm wondering. So see if I can. And now I might just be confusing you guys as much as I confused myself today, but I did find one explanation to what the difference might be. Found this explanation right here, that they're both types of vow, and yet the distinction is easier to draw in some contexts. For instance, to vow by making a neder to bring a sacrifice to the temple creates an obligation upon a person to bring a sacrifice. To vow by making a nedava in that context, by contrast, would create an obligation not upon a specific person to bring a sacrifice, but upon a specific animal that it should be brought as a sacrifice. I can already hear now that I'm not getting any closer to figure this out, but maybe you guys are cleverer than I am. A neder creates an obligation on the person making it. In that sense, it is self-directed action. A nedava, by contrast, creates a more abstract debt that needs to be paid by someone, but not necessarily by the person making it. Accordingly, a nedava is directed towards the action to be done rather than upon the agent who does it. And here is this idea that I was struggling with, or which I was maybe suggesting, that what Shimon HaTzadik is worried about is that the neder becomes inward looking instead of outward looking. And when you do a neder, it is the specific person that has to do something, and immediately it becomes about the person, it becomes about you. But the other way to do it, says the Talmud, is to make a nedava. And when you make a nedava, then it's basically the thing that becomes the focus and not the person. So the thing becomes something that needs to be brought to the temple, and it could be brought by someone else. So it becomes then something that is close, at least maybe closer connected to outward looking, meaning this thing has to go to God. Instead of I have to bring this and I have to do something. It's now about the thing going to God instead of you. So I think that was one of the things I was struggling with trying to understand this Midrash in the context of the Talmud.
Yeah. Very interesting. I mean, this is something that's discussed a lot in the yeshivot. This is a very Tractate Nedarim is one of the very much studied. It's better studied a lot in the yeshivot, and this concept of the Hefza and the Gavra. That means, are we discussing a law applying to an object or an animal, or an action to be done, or are we discussing an obligation on a specific person? But I think you brought very nicely, it's not just a halachic discussion, it's also a question of hashkafa, of philosophical perspective, really, that what are you trying to achieve? Is it about a service of God needs to be done, or is it about I need to serve God? And I can see pros and cons in both, actually. I don't think it's so simple to say what's right or what's wrong. Because, of course, a person who's just thinking about the job needs to get done, he's less arrogant. And he just wants there to be good in the world. Mm-hmm. At the same time, if you're not taking responsibility for it, and you just want the job to get done, then you're not really being proactive in making the world a better place. So I think there's a lot of interesting ideas here. Yes, Tikva Shira, please.
Yes, maybe the question is, but I will ask, can be a Jewish man today be a Nazir? Or is not because it's connected maybe, or...
Yes, so you are right. If a person today, from the real depth of his heart, says he promises to be a Nazir, halachically he's a Nazir. And he has to be a Nazir either the rest of his life, or Bezrat Hashem, Mashiach will come very soon, and then he can bring the sacrifice and finish the Nazirut. But yeah, the law is still the same. We just don't encourage it because of that problem, that you will never be able to stop being a Nazir until you've brought your sacrifices. And it could be a man or a woman, as we said, just because we said a Jewish man, but as we saw in the Torah, Ish or Isha, there were female Nazirot as well that existed.
But I don't know about. I mean, there was one Nazir, a famous one, in Jerusalem a while ago, a few years ago. I think he passed away, right?
I've heard some stories.
Yeah, I don't know of anyone today.
I think so. Not aware of any Nazir today, but you never know.
I haven't There was one famous one connected to the Merkaz Arav.
Yeah, it sounds familiar. There was somebody, and he was even encouraged by his teachers or something to be a Nazir.
I don't know of anyone today, Tikva. So if you see someone, then you should let us know. Or maybe warn us. I don't know, one or the other.
But I didn't know that a woman can be a Nazir.
Yeah.
Didn't know.
Yeah.
I today. Thank you.
Don't get any ideas, Tikva. Very good. Thank you very much, Shmuel.
Yeah, pleasure. Simcha.
Very much.
Thank you for coming and making the.
Beautiful. Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.